By 8:30 on Thursday morning, Mrs. Eleanor Bell had already decided that the envelope was unpleasant. This was not because it contained anything unpleasant. She had not opened it. It was the envelope itself. It lay beside her breakfast plate, perfectly square, cream-colored, and without a stamp. There was no postmark, no address, and, most importantly, no sender's name. Mrs. Bell regarded it with the particular suspicion that some people reserved for unfamiliar dogs. The kettle had boiled twice. Her tea had gone cold. The toast had become structurally incapable of being called toast. Still, she had not touched the envelope. Outside, the village of Ashcombe was conducting its ordinary business beneath a pale September sky. A milk van rattled past the cottage. Someone was arguing with a bicycle near the green. The church clock struck the half-hour with a hesitation between the 6th and 7th strokes, as though it had reconsidered its responsibilities. Mrs. Bell looked at it. Then she looked back at the envelope. She lived at Willow Cottage, a narrow white house at the eastern end of the village, where the road became sufficiently rural to encourage people to drive faster than was sensible. She had been widowed for 11 years and had consequently developed two useful habits. She noticed everything, and she repeated almost nothing unless she was certain it would improve the situation. The envelope was not improving it. At last, she stood. She did not open it. Instead, she carried it into the sitting room and placed it on the mantelpiece. After a moment's thought, she moved it to the writing desk. Then, she moved it back to the mantelpiece. It was during this third arrangement that the knock came. Mrs. Bell turned sharply. A man stood outside the front door, wearing a dark overcoat and carrying a folded newspaper beneath one arm. He was not tall, but he possessed the unhurried manner of someone who had never seen any advantage in appearing hurried. "Inspector Price," he said. Mrs. Bell stared. "I didn't ask for an inspector." "No," said Price pleasantly. "Most people don't." She opened the door another inch. "How did you know I was here?" "I didn't. I was told Mrs. Bell lived at Willow Cottage. The village is remarkably economical with surnames." He glanced past her. "May I come in?" She hesitated. Price smiled. "I'm afraid if I remain on the doorstep, someone will assume you have committed a murder." That seemed to persuade her. She stepped aside. Inspector Price entered, removed his hat, and looked around the sitting room without appearing to look around it. There were photographs on the piano, a brass clock above the fireplace, 3 carefully arranged cushions on a sofa which had never been designed for 3 cushions, and a vase containing chrysanthemums that had reached the stage of life where optimism became an administrative matter. Price noticed all of it. He said nothing. Mrs. Bell pointed towards the mantelpiece. "It came this morning." Price approached. The envelope was ordinary in every respect, except the one that mattered. He leaned slightly closer. "You haven't opened it?" "No." "Why not?" "I don't know who sent it." Price considered this. "That's generally how letters work." She gave him a look. He inclined his head. "Quite." He picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it appeared. Not dramatically heavier, just enough to suggest that there was something more substantial inside than a sheet of paper. Price turned it over. Nothing. No seal, no handwriting, no mark that could reasonably be called a clue. Where was it when you found it? On the breakfast table. Inside the house? Yes. Price looked at her. Mrs. Bell noticed the question behind the question. "I locked the back door last night. I wasn't asking whether you did. You were thinking it." "I often think things," he said. "It saves conversation." She sat down. Price remained standing. "Who knew you were expecting visitors?" "I wasn't. Who might have reason to visit you?" "Nobody." He smiled faintly. "That is a dangerous answer in a village." Mrs. Bell did not smile. Price placed the envelope back on the mantelpiece. Did anyone see it arrive? No. Did you hear anything? Only the cat. Your cat? Mrs. Wiggins. Price looked towards the window. The cat is called Mrs. Wiggins? No, Mrs. Wiggins is my neighbor. He nodded. That is considerably more useful. For the first time, Mrs. Bell almost smiled. Almost. She came by yesterday evening, she said. Did she? Yes. What about? Jam. Price waited. Mrs. Bell frowned. Raspberry jam. I had assumed the jam might be raspberry. Then why ask? Because people are frequently offended when their assumptions are left untested. She looked at him for a long moment. You're rather irritating. So, I've been told. By whom? Mostly people who invited me to tea. There was another silence. This one was less uncomfortable. Price walked to the window. From there he could see the village road, the low stone wall, and beyond it, the church tower rising above the trees. Did Mrs. Wiggins know you were alone last night? I suppose she did. Did she come inside? Yes. For how long? 20 minutes. And after she left? I locked the door. Price turned. You are certain? Mrs. Bell's expression hardened. Yes. He nodded. Good. She looked at the envelope. Do you think someone put it through the door? No. The answer came too quickly. Mrs. Bell noticed. So you do think someone came inside? I think, Price said, that if somebody wished merely to deliver an invitation, they would probably have found a simpler method. Invitation? He looked at the envelope. There is no address, no sender, no stamp, no official seal, and yet it has been placed carefully inside your house. Mrs. Bell swallowed. You think it's an invitation? I think someone wants you to attend something. What? Price glanced at her. That is usually the useful part. She stood. Then perhaps I should open it. Yes. She reached for the envelope. Stopped. What if I don't like what it says? Price put his hat back on. Mrs. Bell, if you waited to open every letter until you were certain you would like its contents, the post office would become a very quiet institution. She looked at him. Then, slowly, she broke the seal. Inside was a single card. Cream paper. No decoration. Only 6 handwritten words. Mrs. Bell read them once. Then again, her face changed. Price did not take the card from her. What does it say? She handed it over. He read it. Please come to the old orchard, 7 o'clock. There was no signature. Price turned the card over. Nothing. Mrs. Bell whispered, I don't know what that means. Price looked through the window towards the distant line of trees beyond the churchyard. Neither, he said, does anyone else, apparently. Then he folded the card carefully and returned it to her. Which, he added, is what makes it interesting. Mrs. Bell looked towards the clock. It was 10 minutes slow. For some reason, that bothered her more than the invitation. Mrs. Bell looked towards the clock again. It remained 10 minutes slow, apparently determined to contribute nothing useful to the morning. Inspector Price noticed the expression on her face. Does that clock always do that? No. Then when did it begin? Yesterday. Price glanced at the clock, then at the card in her hand. Interesting. I don't see why. Neither do I, yet. He moved towards the door. Mrs. Bell followed him. You're leaving. For the moment. But the invitation. Keep it. I thought you might take it. I don't usually carry other people's invitations about with me. They have a tendency to become evidence when one least expects it. She looked uncertainly at the card. What am I supposed to do? Nothing until 7. That seems remarkably unhelpful. It is actually quite helpful. People often spoil mysteries by trying to solve them before lunch. He opened the door. Mrs. Bell stopped him. Inspector. He turned. Who would know about the old orchard? Price looked past her towards the road. Almost everyone. That doesn't narrow it down. No. Then what does? He smiled faintly. Who would know which name not to put on an invitation? With that, he left. Mrs. Bell stood in the doorway until he reached the road alone that morning. Only then did she close it. The old orchard lay beyond the churchyard, on a piece of neglected ground that had once belonged to the Bell family. It had not been properly cultivated for nearly 20 years. The trees still produced apples, but only in quantities sufficient to annoy anyone attempting to clear the grass beneath them. By 10 o'clock, Mrs. Bell had decided she would not go there at 7. By 10:30, she had decided she probably would. At 11, she went to the village shop. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Pike, looked up as she entered. Morning. Morning. Mrs. Bell selected a loaf. You've already bought bread. I know. Mrs. Pike placed the loaf beside the till. Then this is serious. Mrs. Bell hesitated. I received a letter. Mrs. Pike's eyes brightened by approximately 1 degree. Did you? An invitation. How nice. There was no name. The brightness disappeared. Mrs. Pike glanced towards the window. Whose name? The sender's. Oh. A silence followed. Mrs. Bell noticed it. So you think that's strange too? I think most things are strange when you examine them closely. Do you know anything about the old orchard? Mrs. Pike began arranging packets of biscuits. Which part? The one beyond the churchyard. Everyone knows that place. Who owns it now? You do, Mrs. Bell frowned. I thought the council had taken responsibility for it. They tried. And? The council discovered that responsibility was not the same thing as ownership. Mrs. Bell almost laughed. That sounds like the council. Mrs. Pike smiled. Then she said, There was someone asking about it last week. Mrs. Bell stopped smiling. Who? I don't remember. You do. I remember that someone asked. Man or woman? Mrs. Pike considered. Man. What did he look like? Ordinary. That is not helpful. It was an ordinary sort of man. Age? Perhaps 50. Hair? Hair-colored. Mrs. Bell stared at her. Mrs. Pike shrugged. The shop door opened. Mr. Arthur Vale entered. He stopped when he saw Mrs. Bell. Good morning. Good morning. His eyes moved briefly to Mrs. Pike, then back to Mrs. Bell. Everything all right? Perfectly. Good. Mr. Vale was the retired schoolmaster, although retirement had done little to remove his habit of correcting other people's assumptions. Mrs. Bell watched him pay. Do you know the old orchard? Of course. Someone has invited me there tonight. His hand stopped, only for a second. But Price would later have considered that second important. Mr. Vale looked at her. Invited you? Yes. To the orchard? Yes. How odd. Why? He folded his newspaper. Because nobody goes there after dark. Why not? Because there is no reason to. That answer sounded reasonable. It also sounded prepared. Mrs. Bell noticed that too. Mr. Vale gave a small smile. Don't worry yourself, Eleanor. Villages produce mysteries whenever people are bored. I don't think this is boredom. No? No. He looked at her carefully. Then perhaps you should ask who benefits from your curiosity. Mrs. Bell did not answer. Mr. Vale left. Mrs. Pike watched through the glass. He shouldn't have said that. Why? Because now you'll wonder what he meant. I already was. Mrs. Pike sighed. By noon, the invitation had acquired 3 possible explanations. The first was that someone wanted to frighten her. The second was that someone wanted her to remember something. The third was that someone had made a mistake. The third seemed the most sensible, which was precisely why Mrs. Bell disliked it. She placed the card beside the clock. Then she noticed something she had missed before. The handwriting was not careless. It was neat, deliberate, and unusually formal. But the first word, please, had been written with a slight pressure on the final letter. Mrs. Bell knew that handwriting. She could not immediately say whose it was. That frightened her more than if she had recognized it. At 1 o'clock, Inspector Price returned. He had changed nothing about his appearance except his expression. "You spoke to Mrs. Pike," he said. Mrs. Bell stared. "How did you know?" "She telephoned the station." "Why?" "She wanted to know whether she had been helpful." "And was she?" "Very." Price looked at the card. "Did Mr. Vale come into the shop?" Mrs. Bell's silence answered him. Price nodded. "Then we have our first difficulty." "What difficulty?" "He knows the invitation exists." Mrs. Bell looked towards the window. "But how?" Price did not answer. Instead, he glanced at the clock. 10 minutes slow. He smiled. "Mrs. Bell, I think someone has been trying rather hard to make this village remember the wrong thing." She looked at him. "And what is the right thing?" Price picked up his hat. "That," he said, "is why the missing name matters." Price did not explain himself immediately. He had developed the useful habit of allowing other people to become uncomfortable before he offered them an explanation. It was not cruelty, it was economy. People tended to fill silence with information. Mrs. Bell waited. "You said Mr. Vale knew about the invitation," she said. "I said he knew it existed. That is the same thing." "Not quite." He placed the card on the table. "The distinction matters." Outside, a delivery bicycle passed the window. The rider waved at Mrs. Bell without slowing. She waved back automatically, then seemed irritated with herself for having done so. "Everyone in this village knows everything," she said. "Usually," said Price, "everyone knows a different version." He asked her to tell him exactly what Mr. Vale had said in the shop. She repeated the conversation. Price listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked, "Did he say the orchard had been abandoned?" "No." "Did he say he had been there?" "No." "Did he say he knew about your invitation before you mentioned it?" Mrs. Bell frowned. "No, not exactly." "That is the interesting part." She looked at him. "You're making very little sense." "I've been accused of that before." He picked up the card. "Let us go to the orchard." They left at 10 minutes past 2. The afternoon had lost the freshness of morning. Clouds gathered over the church tower, and a damp wind moved through the hedges. The path beside the churchyard was narrow enough to make walking beside another person slightly inconvenient. Price went first. Mrs. Bell followed. "You know," she said, "people have remembered things about that orchard before." Price stopped. "What things?" "That depends whom you ask." They continued. "Mrs. Pike says children used to play there." "Did they?" "Yes." "Mr. Vale says nobody goes there." "He would." "Why?" Mrs. Bell gave him a sideways look. "You've already decided he is suspicious." "No. You asked about him first." "I asked about the person who knew about the invitation." "That sounds like suspicion." "It is observation." "That sounds suspiciously similar." Price smiled. At the orchard gate, they found the chain hanging loose. Mrs. Bell stopped. "It was tied yesterday." Price examined the chain without touching it. "Was it locked?" "No." "Then someone has opened it." "Or the wind did." "The wind is remarkably industrious in Ashcombe." They entered. The grass reached Mrs. Bell's ankles. Old apple trees stood in irregular rows, their branches dark against the sky. At the far end stood a small wooden bench. Mrs. Bell pointed. "That was not there last year." Price approached it. Someone had painted the bench recently. The paint was still faintly glossy. On the seat lay a folded sheet of paper. Mrs. Bell did not move. Price picked it up. There was no writing on it, only a list of names. Mrs. Bell leaned closer. "I know all of them, so do I," Price said. "That's impossible." "Not particularly. The list is from the village directory." She looked again. There were 17 names. At the bottom, beneath the last name, someone had written, "One of these remembers." Mrs. Bell felt the damp wind against her face. Remembers what? Price folded the paper. That is the question. A sound came from behind the trees. Both turned. Mr. Vale stepped onto the path. He appeared mildly annoyed rather than surprised. "I wondered when you would come here." Mrs. Bell stared at him. "You knew we were coming?" "No." "Then why are you here?" He looked towards the bench, to see whether it was still there. Price studied him. "Were you expecting the list?" Mr. Vale's expression changed. "Only slightly." "No." "Do you recognize the handwriting?" "No." You answered quickly. "Because I don't." Price nodded. Mrs. Bell looked between them. "You told me nobody came here after dark." "I said nobody had a reason to, and now you have one." Mr. Vale sighed. "You have always been too literal, Eleanor." "That is not an answer." "No." He looked at the list. "People remember what suits them," Price said quietly, "and sometimes they remember the same thing because someone has persuaded them to." Mr. Vale looked at him. "You think this is about memory?" "I think someone has taken considerable trouble to make people believe it is." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mr. Vale said, "You should ask Mrs. Pike about the summer of 1998. Mrs. Bell stared. "Why?" But he had already turned away. Price watched him disappear between the trees. Mrs. Bell said, "What happened in 1998? Price looked at the names again. "I don't know." "You're not telling me something." "I am." "That isn't reassuring." "No," said Price. "It rarely is." They walked back towards the gate. Halfway there, Mrs. Bell stopped. "Inspector." Price turned. She was looking at the paper in his hand. "There are 17 names." "Yes." "My name isn't there." Price looked down. She was right. Her name was absent. So was Mr. Vale's. Price's expression became serious. "The invitation," he said, "was never intended to remind you of something." He folded the paper once more. "It was intended to find out whether you already remembered it." Mrs. Bell said nothing. She asked, "Remembered what?" Price looked back at the orchard. "Not yet. That is becoming a habit." "Perhaps." She followed him through the gate. "You said the missing name mattered." "It does. Because my name isn't on that list. Because whoever made the list knew enough about you to leave you off it." "I don't understand." "It may make sense to its writer." They reached the road. Mrs. Bell looked towards the church. "I have lived here. I know. I have never heard anyone mention 1998. Price adjusted his hat. "People rarely mention events they have agreed to forget." She stopped. "Agreed?" He looked at her. "I said people rarely mention them. I did not say why." A church bell sounded once. Mrs. Bell looked at the tower. A woman stood outside the post office, pretending to examine a notice. When she saw Price looking, she went inside. Mrs. Bell noticed. "Who is that?" "Mrs. Harcourt." "Why would she be watching us?" "Perhaps she wasn't." "You don't believe that?" "No." They continued towards the village. Price did not go directly to Mrs. Harcourt's house. He went to the post office. Mrs. Bell noticed this and said nothing. She had begun to understand that Inspector Price preferred approaching a question from the side, rather like someone entering a room where an argument was already taking place. Mrs. Harcourt was not in the shop. "She was here a moment ago," said the postmistress. "You saw her leave?" "Yes." "Which way?" The postmistress pointed towards the square. Price thanked her. Mrs. Bell looked at him. You knew she would leave. No. You walked here as though you did. I walked here as though I had somewhere to go. That is evasive. Very. They crossed the square. Mrs. Harcourt's house stood behind a clipped hedge, with blue paint around the front door and 2 brass numbers polished to an almost aggressive shine. Price knocked. There was no answer. He knocked again. A voice came from inside. Who is it? Inspector Price. Silence. Then the door opened. Mrs. Harcourt was a small woman with silver hair and an expression of permanent disappointment. Inspector. Good afternoon. You've come about the orchard. It was not a question. Mrs. Bell looked at Price. He noticed. I have come to ask you about it. Mrs. Harcourt opened the door wider. You had better come in. The sitting room smelled of lavender and furniture polish. A teapot stood on the table beside 3 cups. Mrs. Bell stopped. There are already 3. Mrs. Harcourt looked at the cups. Oh? She seemed genuinely surprised. I was expecting someone. Who? Price asked. I don't know. Mrs. Bell frowned. Mrs. Harcourt gave a nervous laugh. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Only slightly, said Price. She looked relieved. Tea? Thank you. They sat. Mrs. Harcourt poured 3 cups, although nobody had yet accepted one. Price watched her. You expected somebody here this afternoon? Yes. Did they give you a time? No. Did they say they were coming? No. Then how did you know? Mrs. Harcourt hesitated. There was an invitation. Mrs. Bell leaned forward. An invitation? Yes. From whom? That is the difficulty. Mrs. Harcourt reached into a drawer and removed an envelope. It was cream-colored. Mrs. Bell stared. That is the same. No, said Price. Mrs. Bell looked at him. He pointed. Look at the fold. Her envelope had been folded once across the middle. Mrs. Harcourt's had been folded twice. The difference was small but deliberate. Price opened the envelope. Inside was a card. He read it. 4 o'clock. Tea at number 6. Mrs. Harcourt looked embarrassed. I assumed it meant this house. Mrs. Bell stared at her. Your house is number 14. I know. Then why would you think number 6? Because it was written very clearly indeed. Price turned the card over. Nothing. Did you go to number 6? No. Why not? I remembered that number 6 has been empty for years. Mrs. Bell looked at Price. So someone sent you to an empty house? Yes. And sent me to the orchard? Yes. Mrs. Harcourt looked from one to the other. Then perhaps we're being made fools of. Price smiled. That is certainly possible. She looked offended. You don't seem concerned. I am concerned. You don't look it. I've had practice. Mrs. Bell took a sip of tea. It was too sweet. She put the cup down. Who lives at number 6? No one, said Mrs. Harcourt. Who owns it? Mrs. Harcourt glanced at Price. The Bell family. Mrs. Bell stiffened. My family? Yes. I didn't know that. You did once. I certainly did not. Mrs. Harcourt looked uncomfortable. Eleanor, your father owned it. Mrs. Bell stared at her. My father? Price remained silent. Mrs. Harcourt continued. He bought it shortly before he died. When? 1998. The room became very quiet. Mrs. Bell looked at Price. He was studying the invitation. Why have I never heard this? Mrs. Harcourt lowered her eyes. Because it was sold. To whom? No one. Mrs. Bell stared. That makes no sense. It didn't then either. Price placed the card on the table. Who told you about the sale? Your father. My father was dead. Before he died. Mrs. Bell's face tightened. What did he say? Mrs. Harcourt looked towards the window. He said number 6 was not meant to belong to anyone for very long. Price asked. Did he explain why? No. Did anyone else know? Yes. Who? Mrs. Harcourt gave a small, tired smile. Everyone who was involved. That is not a name. No. Mrs. Harcourt. She looked at him. The solicitor was Mr. Vale. Mrs. Bell closed her eyes briefly. Price did not react. Instead, he looked at the 3 cups on the table. You prepared tea for 3 people? Yes, but only 2 of us arrived. Mrs. Harcourt's expression changed. I told you I was expecting someone. Did the invitation say who? No. Then why prepare 3 cups? She stared at the table. I don't know. Price stood. Neither do I. Mrs. Bell rose. As they reached the door, Mrs. Harcourt called after them. Inspector. Price turned. She was holding the 3rd cup. There is something else. What? The invitation did not arrive this morning. Mrs. Bell looked at her. When did it arrive? Yesterday. Price's eyes narrowed. Before Mrs. Bell received hers? Yes. Did anyone see you open it? No. Who knew about it? Mrs. Harcourt hesitated. Mr. Vale. Mrs. Bell sighed. Price put on his hat. Then we have a man who knew about 2 invitations before either of us knew about both. He opened the door. Mrs. Harcourt called again. There is one thing I don't understand. Price waited. Why send me to number 6? He looked back at the blue door. Perhaps, he said, you were not the person meant to receive the invitation. Mrs. Bell stared at him. Then who was? Price glanced towards the empty house at the far end of the road. That, he said, is becoming the important question. The road to number 6 ran behind the church and ended at a pair of iron gates which had not been opened for years. Price stood before them with his hands in his coat pockets. Mrs. Bell looked through the bars. I remember this place. You said you didn't. I remember the house. I don't remember my father owning it. That distinction may be important. The house beyond the gate was smaller than Mrs. Bell expected. Its windows were dusty, its front door painted a fading green, and the garden had been left to whatever ambitions weeds possessed. Price examined the lock. It has been opened recently. Mrs. Bell stared. How can you tell? The rust has been disturbed. She looked at him. You said this wasn't about forensics. I said they weren't usually the interesting part. He pushed the gate. It opened without resistance. Mrs. Bell followed reluctantly. A stone path disappeared beneath grass. Near the front steps stood an empty flower pot. Someone had recently placed a cigarette in it and crushed it out carefully. Price noticed. So, someone has been here. Mr. Vale? Perhaps. You think everything leads to him. No. At present, everything leads to someone who knows Mr. Vale. The front door was unlocked. Mrs. Bell stopped. We shouldn't go in. I agree. Price opened it. She stared at him. You've just disagreed with yourself. I said we shouldn't. I didn't say we wouldn't. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood and old paper. The entrance hall contained little furniture. A coat hook stood beside the stairs. On it hung a dark woman's coat. Mrs. Bell stopped breathing for a moment. That's impossible. Price turned. Why? My mother had one exactly like that. He looked at the coat. Exactly? Same color, same buttons. Your mother died when? 2001. Price did not touch it. Instead, he walked towards the sitting room. A table stood beneath the window. On it were 3 objects, a teacup, a brass key, and a folded newspaper. The newspaper was from the previous Thursday. Mrs. Bell looked at the cup. It is still warm. Price raised an eyebrow. She touched the porcelain. It is. Then someone has left very recently. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Mrs. Bell turned. Price held up one hand. The sound came again. Then footsteps. Someone descended slowly. A man appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He was in his late 50s, neatly dressed, with thinning grey hair and the mildly irritated expression of someone who had been interrupted while doing something he considered private. Mrs. Bell recognized him. Mr. Daniel Cross. Cross looked at her. Mrs. Bell. Price introduced himself. Cross nodded. I know who you are. That saves time. What are you doing here? Price looked around. We might ask you the same question. Cross glanced towards the table. His eyes settled on the invitation Mrs. Bell was holding. I see. You were invited? Price asked. No. Then you are the guest who was not asked. Cross gave him a thin smile. I suppose I am. Mrs. Bell looked confused. Why are you here? I received a message. From whom? I don't know. What did it say? Cross hesitated. That I should come to number 6. Mrs. Bell looked at Price. Did it mention a time? 3 o'clock. It is nearly 4. I was delayed. By what? Cross's expression hardened. By the fact that I did not particularly want to come. Price glanced at the teacup. You made tea? I didn't. Then who did? I don't know. You came alone? Yes. Did you expect anyone? No. Cross moved towards the table. He picked up the newspaper. I came here because someone told me I had been mentioned. Mentioned where? In connection with 1998. Mrs. Bell's face changed. Price watched Cross carefully. What happened in 1998? Cross laughed once, without amusement. You already know. I don't. You're investigating the invitations. Yes. Then you know enough to be asking the wrong questions. Price remained polite. What would be the right question? Cross looked at Mrs. Bell. Why did your father buy this house? Mrs. Bell's voice was quiet. I don't know. Cross nodded. Exactly. He put the newspaper down. There was a meeting here. When? August 1998. Who attended? Cross looked towards the stairs. Your father, Mr. Vale. Mrs. Harcourt. And you? No. Then why do you know about it? Cross hesitated. My brother attended. What was his name? Thomas. Mrs. Bell frowned. I don't remember a Thomas Cross. You wouldn't. Why? He died 3 days after the meeting. The room seemed to shrink. Price did not move. How? Car accident. Was it investigated? Yes. Was anything unusual found? Cross shook his head. Nothing anyone cared to remember. Price looked at him. That phrase has appeared twice today. It is common in this village. Perhaps. Cross reached into his coat and produced a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Price. It was an old receipt. The date was August 17th, 1998. At the bottom was a signature. Price read it. Your father's. Mrs. Bell took the paper. She stared at the handwriting. It is his. What was purchased? Cross pointed. A lock. For number 6. Yes. Price studied the receipt. Why would your father buy a lock after buying the house? Cross smiled bitterly. He didn't. Mrs. Bell looked at him. He bought the lock before. Price understood. You are saying the house was already locked when your father bought it? No. Cross looked towards the dark staircase. I am saying he bought the lock because someone had already opened the door. A silence followed. Then the front door moved. All 3 turned. No one entered. But on the doorstep lay a cream envelope. Price walked towards it. He did not pick it up. Mrs. Bell whispered, another invitation. Price looked at Cross. No. Cross's face had gone pale. That isn't an invitation. What is it? Cross swallowed. A warning. Price looked down at the envelope. For the first time that afternoon, his expression lost its mild amusement. Then, he said quietly, someone has finally stopped pretending this is a social occasion. Mrs. Bell stepped closer to the doorway, but Price stopped her with a quiet gesture. Don't. She looked at him. Why? Because whoever placed it there expects somebody to pick it up. Cross gave a nervous laugh. And you won't? Not yet. Price looked beyond the envelope towards the empty road. A cyclist passed the church wall, slowed, and continued without looking towards the house. That small act of indifference seemed almost deliberate. Mrs. Bell noticed it too. Everyone knows, she said. Price shook his head. No, everyone is watching. And what is the difference? The first is gossip. He looked again at the envelope. The second is fear. Mrs. Bell folded her arms. Then why send 3 of us here? Price glanced at Cross. Perhaps 3 people are required to remember something accurately. Cross looked at him sharply. Or to contradict one another. Price smiled faintly. In Ashcombe, that is considerably more likely. The wind moved through the hedge. Somewhere behind the house, a gate clicked shut. Nobody had touched it. Price turned his head. Now, he said, we have another visitor outside. The gate clicked again. Price did not move. Mrs. Bell stood beside him, listening to footsteps that never came. Cross remained near the table, watching the doorway with an expression that suggested he had seen enough strange things for one afternoon. At last, Price stepped outside. The road was empty. He looked towards the hedge, then along the wall, and finally back at the house. Nothing, said Mrs. Bell. Not quite. He pointed to the ground. A small patch of mud had been disturbed beside the gate. There was a heel mark, then another, leading away from the house. Cross came outside. That wasn't there when I arrived. You're certain? Yes. Price crouched briefly. Good. Mrs. Bell frowned. Why is that good? Because it means someone has been honest. Cross looked offended. I have been honest. I meant the mud. Price stood. They returned indoors. The cream envelope remained on the doorstep. Shouldn't we take it? Mrs. Bell asked. Eventually. You said it was a warning. I did. How do you know? I don't. Mr. Cross does. Cross looked at him. I told you. You did. But you don't believe me. I believe that you believe it. That is not the same thing. No. Price walked to the table and picked up the old newspaper. The date was circled in pencil. August 19th, 1998. Mrs. Bell noticed. 2 days after the receipt. Yes. What happened then? Cross answered before Price could. Thomas died. Mrs. Bell looked at him. You said 3 days after the meeting. I did. Then why is the date circled? Cross stared at the newspaper. I don't know. Price turned the page. There was a small article near the bottom. A local man had died in a road accident outside the village. The report was brief. There was no suggestion of anything unusual. Mrs. Bell read it twice. Why was this forgotten? Cross gave a tired laugh. It wasn't forgotten. Then why does everyone say it was? Because remembering is not the same as discussing. Price looked at him. That distinction may be the most useful thing anyone has said today. Mrs. Bell sat down. I don't understand any of this. Cross remained standing. Neither did my brother. Did Thomas speak to you before he died? Yes. When? The evening before. What did he say? Cross hesitated. He said he had been invited somewhere. Mrs. Bell's eyes narrowed. Where? Here. The room became quiet. Number 6? Yes. By whom? I don't know. Did he go? Yes. Alone? No. Cross looked towards Price. He went with your father. Mrs. Bell's face went pale. My father was with Thomas that night. That is what Thomas told me. But my father was supposed to be at home. Cross shrugged. That was the story. Price sat opposite Mrs. Bell. Did your father ever mention Thomas? No. Did he mention number 6? No. Did he mention the orchard? Mrs. Bell hesitated. Once. Price waited. He told me never to walk there after sunset. Did he explain? He said there were loose branches. Cross gave a short laugh. That was his explanation for everything. Mrs. Bell looked at him. You knew my father well. No. Then how do you know what he said? Cross's expression tightened. My brother told me. Price leaned back. The conversation had changed. Until then, everyone had been speaking about invitations. Now they were speaking about what people had chosen not to say. Mrs. Bell looked towards the envelope outside. Who sent these? Cross answered quietly. Someone who knows what happened. Price shook his head. Possibly. Cross stared at him. You don't think so? I think someone wants us to believe that. Why? Because the invitations have done something very useful. What? They have brought people together who would otherwise have continued remembering separately. Mrs. Bell looked at him. And if their memories disagree, then someone can discover which version is dangerous. Cross went silent. Price looked towards the window. A figure had appeared at the far end of the road. It was Mrs. Pike. She stopped outside the gate. She did not approach. Mrs. Bell opened the door. Mrs. Pike? The shopkeeper looked towards the envelope. I came to tell you something. What? Mrs. Pike swallowed. The invitation you received wasn't the first. Price stepped closer. When was the first? Yesterday morning. Who received it? Mrs. Pike looked at Mrs. Bell. I did. Mrs. Bell stared. You? Yes. Why didn't you say? Because I was frightened. Price's voice remained gentle. What did yours say? Mrs. Pike looked down. It asked me to come to number 6. At what time? 8 o'clock. Did you go? No. Why? Because someone else was already there. Price waited. Mrs. Pike whispered, I saw a light upstairs. Mrs. Bell looked at the house. It has no electricity. I know. Cross moved towards the window. I knew it. Price turned. Junta 19. Knew what? Cross pointed towards the upper floor. That someone is still using the house. Price looked at the dark windows. Then he smiled, but there was no humor in it. No. Everyone looked at him. The interesting question is not who is using number 6. He picked up his hat. It is why they want us to think someone is. Outside, the cream envelope remained untouched. The village road had begun to fill with people returning from work. Mrs. Pike looked at them through the doorway. They'll know by tonight. Yes, Price said, and they'll talk. They always do. What will they say? Price glanced at Mrs. Bell. That depends on who speaks first. Mrs. Pike lowered her voice. Mrs. Harcourt already has. Price stopped. What did she say? She told me your father never owned number 6. Mrs. Bell stared. But she told us he did. Price looked towards the road. For the first time, the village seemed less like a collection of houses and more like a room in which everyone had been listening. Then, he said, someone has just changed the conversation. Mrs. Bell felt a chill, although the afternoon was mild. She understood that the invitations were not bringing a secret. They were moving a secret from one person to another until nobody could remember who had first possessed it. Price returned to Willow Cottage with Mrs. Bell shortly after 4, while the village began its quiet transformation from working afternoon to evening gossip. Curtains shifted, doors opened, Conversations that had previously concerned weather and shopping acquired, without any visible encouragement, a new subject. Mrs. Bell noticed all of it. "They know. They suspect," said Price. "That is worse." Usually, she unlocked her front door. Price stopped her before she entered. "Wait." The door stood open by less than an inch. Mrs. Bell stared. "I locked it." "I know." "How?" "You told me." Price pushed the door gently. It opened. Nothing appeared disturbed in the hallway. The umbrella stand remained beside the radiator. A pair of gardening shoes sat beneath the bench. Her handbag was where she had left it. Yet something had changed. Mrs. Bell felt it immediately. The clock. Price looked towards the mantelpiece. The brass clock had been moved. Only a few inches, but it now stood beside the vase, rather than beneath the painting. "I didn't move that." Price approached it. "Did anyone else have reason to?" "No." He examined the clock face. It had stopped. At 20 minutes past 3. Mrs. Bell looked at him. "That is when we were at number 6. "Precisely. You think someone came here while we were away. I think someone wanted you to notice that they had." Price walked through the sitting room. Nothing else seemed altered. Then Mrs. Bell noticed the writing desk. The card inviting her to the orchard was gone. She searched the drawer. Nothing. "I put it here." "When?" "Before we left." Price looked at the empty space. "Did anyone know?" "No." "Then whoever entered knew where to look." Mrs. Bell's voice became quieter. "What if they were looking for something else?" Price did not answer. He crossed to the bookcase. Rows of novels stood neatly arranged. Beside them were family histories, parish records, old correspondence, and several account books. He removed one. Dust marked the shelf beneath it. "This has been taken out recently." Mrs. Bell came closer. "What is it?" "A household ledger." She took it from him. "It belonged to my father." "Was it usually here?" "Yes." Price opened it. Most pages contained ordinary entries: coal, repairs, wages, garden expenses. Then he found a page dated August 1998. The handwriting changed halfway down. Mrs. Bell read the first line. "Number 14. She looked up. "That is this house." Price continued reading silently. "What does it say?" He handed her the ledger. There were only 3 words. "Key delivered separately." Mrs. Bell stared. "What key?" Price closed the book. "That is what someone came here to find." For several seconds nobody spoke. Mr. Vale looked at the parcel as though it had become heavier. Mrs. Bell noticed that his hands were trembling. "You knew about the key," she said. "I knew there was a key." "Where is it?" "I don't have it." "But you said your father left something with you." "The parcel is not the key." "Then what is inside?" Vale looked towards Price. "A record." "Of what?" "Who came here?" Mrs. Bell frowned. "In 1998. Vale nodded. "Names?" "Names, times, and 1 instruction." Price waited. "What instruction?" Vale's voice dropped. "Never open the cellar door after the invitation has been delivered." Mrs. Bell looked towards the floor. "There is no cellar." Mr. Vale stared at her. "That is what your father wanted everyone to believe." A knock sounded at the front door. Neither moved. 3 knocks followed, evenly spaced. Mrs. Bell whispered, "Who would come now?" Price smiled faintly. "In this village, someone who has heard enough to become curious." He opened the door. Mr. Vale stood outside. He held a small brown parcel. "Inspector." "Mr. Vale. I need to speak with Mrs. Bell. She is here." Mr. Vale looked past him. His expression changed when he saw the ledger. "I see." Price noticed. "You recognize it?" "Of course." "Why?" "It belonged to her father. So you knew it was here?" Yes. Mrs. Bell stepped forward. Why did you tell Mrs. Harcourt that my father never owned number 6? Mr. Vale looked at her. I did not. She says you did. Then she is mistaken. About what? About several things. Price watched the exchange. Mr. Vale placed the parcel on the table. What is that? Mrs. Bell asked. Something your father left with me. Why? He asked me to keep it. For how long? Until someone asked for it. Mrs. Bell stared. Someone has. No, said Vale. Not yet. Price looked at the parcel. Then why bring it? Mr. Vale hesitated. Because the invitations have started. The room fell silent. You knew they would, Price asked. I feared they might. When? Since last month. Mrs. Bell looked at him sharply. And you said nothing. I was trying to prevent this. By saying nothing. It seemed preferable. Price gave a quiet sigh. Silence is very popular in Ashcombe. Mr. Vale looked at him. You should understand something, Inspector. People here are not hiding a murder. No, they are hiding a promise. Mrs. Bell frowned. What promise? Vale shook his head. Not mine to tell. Price stepped closer. Then perhaps the person sending invitations intends to make you tell it. Mr. Vale looked genuinely afraid. That, he said, is exactly what I am afraid of. A sound came from the hallway. The front door moved slightly. Mrs. Bell turned. No one was there. But beneath the door lay a narrow strip of paper. Price picked it up. 4 words had been written across it. You have the wrong house. Mrs. Bell looked at the door. This is number 14. Price folded the paper. Yes. Then, what house is the right one? He looked at Mr. Vale. Vale did not answer. Price's expression hardened. Perhaps, he said, the problem is that number 14 was never merely a house. Even Price seemed to have run out of polite questions, which concerned Mrs. Bell. Mrs. Bell did not answer immediately. She stood beside the table, looking at the parcel Mr. Vale had brought, while Price held the narrow strip of paper between 2 fingers. You have the wrong house. The sentence was simple enough. Its effect was not. What did my father forget? She asked. Mr. Vale lowered his eyes. Nothing. Price looked at him. That is an ambitious claim. I mean, he remembered everything that mattered. Mrs. Bell gave a quiet, humorless laugh. My father remembered the price of coal for 15 years. He forgot my birthday twice. That is different. Why? Because he was afraid. The room became still. Price put the paper on the mantelpiece. Afraid of what? Mr. Vale looked towards the window. Of being asked the wrong question. Mrs. Bell folded her arms. You have been speaking in riddles since you arrived. I know. Why? Because I promised your father. She stared at him. You promised a dead man. Yes. That seems rather inconvenient. It has been. Price almost smiled. Mrs. Bell looked at the parcel. Open it. Vale shook his head. Not here. Why not? Because this is the wrong house. Mrs. Bell stepped towards him. This is my house. Yes. My father's house. Yes. Then where should it be opened? Vale hesitated. The orchard. Price looked at him sharply. Why? Because that is where the promise was made. Mrs. Bell turned away. Something in the answer had disturbed her. She went to the bookcase and began removing old papers without any obvious purpose. Price watched her. What are you looking for? I don't know. That is usually how looking begins. She ignored him. One by one, she examined envelopes, receipts, photographs, and folded notes. Then she stopped. A photograph had slipped behind the lowest shelf. She picked it up. It showed 5 people standing beside the orchard gate. Her father was in the center. Mr. Vale stood beside him. Mrs. Harcourt was there too, and two younger men Mrs. Bell did not recognize. She turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. August 17. Keep this forgotten. Mrs. Bell closed her eyes. I remember this. Price remained silent. My father took me to the orchard that evening. Vale looked at her. You were there? Yes. You were 12. I was 13. You weren't supposed to remember. She looked at him. I remember the rain. Price's expression changed slightly. What else? My father told me to wait near the gate. Why? I don't know. Try. She stared at the photograph. There was an argument. Between whom? My father and one of the men. Which man? I don't know. You must have heard his name. Mrs. Bell frowned. Then her face changed. Thomas. Vale closed his eyes. Price said nothing. Mrs. Bell continued. I remember my father saying that Thomas had no right to open the door. What door? The cellar. There is no cellar. I know. She looked confused. That is what he told me afterwards. He said there had never been a cellar. Price glanced at Vale. And did you believe him? I was 13. That is not an answer. It was enough of one then. Mrs. Bell sat down. I remember something else. Neither man interrupted. My father came back to me carrying a key. Price leaned forward. What did he do with it? He gave it to me. Vale looked alarmed. Eleanor. She ignored him. He said, if anyone asks, you never saw this. What did you do with it? I buried it. Where? The garden. Price stood. Do you remember where? Mrs. Bell shook her head. No. Then she smiled faintly. I thought I did. Price waited. She touched the photograph. Near the rose bed. There are 3 rose beds. The old one. It was removed years ago. No. Mrs. Bell looked at him. It was moved. Price's eyes narrowed. Where? She pointed towards the back window. Under the kitchen. Mr. Vale stared at her. That cannot be. It is. You were told never to go there. I know. Then why did you? She looked at him. Because I had forgotten. Price walked to the window. The kitchen stood at the rear of the cottage, its foundations older than the rest of the building. Mrs. Bell, he said quietly, what exactly did you forget? She looked down at the photograph. The invitation. Price turned. What invitation? The one my father received. Vale's face went pale. He received one? Yes. When? Before the meeting. What did it say? Mrs. Bell closed her eyes. I don't remember all of it. Price waited. Only the first line. She opened her eyes. Come to number 14. Bring the key. Nobody spoke. The meaning of the anonymous invitations changed quietly between them. Mrs. Bell looked at Price. So it began here. No, he said. She frowned. Then where? Price glanced at the parcel. That is what the person who sent your invitation wants us to believe. Mr. Vale finally spoke. Your father never forgot that night. Mrs. Bell looked at him. He forgot nothing, Vale said. He simply decided that you would be safer if you did. Safer from whom? Vale looked towards the door. From the person who knew you had the key. A sound came from the kitchen. Something metallic struck the floor. Mrs. Bell turned. Price moved first. They reached the kitchen together. Nothing was there. Only an old brass hook lay on the tiles. Mrs. Bell stared at it. That was hanging beside the back door. Price picked it up. Behind it, beneath the loose plaster, was a narrow cavity. Inside lay a small rusted tin. Mrs. Bell whispered, I remember now. Price looked at her. What? The key wasn't buried. She touched the tin without opening it. I hid it here. Then, from somewhere beyond the garden wall, came the unmistakable sound of someone walking away. Price raised one hand. Stay here. Mrs. Bell almost objected, but something in his voice stopped her. He went through the back door and into the garden. No one was visible, yet the garden gate stood open. A bicycle had been left against the wall. Mrs. Bell had seen it that morning outside the post office. Price returned without touching it. Someone has been listening, he said. To us? Mrs. Bell asked. To you. Why? Because you have remembered something they believed was gone. She looked at the tin. What if I open it? Price glanced towards the clock. Then we may discover why your father was so determined that you should deliberately forget. Mrs. Bell did not open the tin. Not immediately. She carried it into the sitting room and placed it beside the invitation, the photograph, and the old ledger. 4 objects, none remarkable alone, had somehow acquired the disagreeable quality of evidence. It was Sunday afternoon. The village was quiet in the way villages became quiet when everyone was awake and pretending not to be interested in anything. Church had finished an hour earlier. Curtains had settled back into their usual positions. The butcher's delivery van had disappeared. Somewhere beyond the green, a lawnmower was being operated with the determination of a man who believed grass possessed a personal grievance. Inspector Price sat near the window. Mr. Vale had refused tea. Mrs. Bell thought this was suspicious. Price thought it was sensible. You've had enough tea for one lifetime, he told her. I have not. You have had 6 cups since lunch. 5. 6. She looked at the cups. There were 6. I wasn't counting. That, said Price, is becoming a recurring feature. Mr. Vale remained standing. He had spent most of the afternoon refusing to explain anything completely, which had made Mrs. Bell increasingly impatient. At last she turned to him. You promised my father. Yes. To keep me from remembering. Yes. That sounds absurd. It did at the time. And now it sounds worse. Price looked towards the tin. Why don't you open it? Mr. Vale answered before Mrs. Bell could. Because the person who sent the invitations expects her to. Price glanced at him. Possibly. You still doubt it. I doubt everything until it becomes inconvenient to do so. Mrs. Bell gave a small sigh. Then what do you believe? Price looked at the photograph. I believe your father received an invitation in 1998. I believe a key was involved. I believe several people agreed never to discuss the matter. I believe someone has recently decided that agreement is no longer useful. And the present invitations? They are designed to make everyone speak. Mr. Vale shook his head. Not everyone. No, Price said. Only the people who know enough to be frightened. A knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Bell stiffened. Price smiled. Sunday afternoon. Who is it? Someone who thinks visiting is still respectable. The knock came again. Mrs. Bell opened the door. Mrs. Pike stood outside holding a covered dish. I've brought a pie. Mrs. Bell stared. A pie? Apple. I see. Mrs. Pike looked past her. May I come in? Price rose. Of course. Mrs. Pike entered, carrying the dish as though it were a passport. She placed it on the table. I thought you might be hungry. We are not, said Mrs. Bell. Mrs. Pike looked at the 6 cups. I can see that. Her eyes moved to the tin. She stopped. What is that? A tin, said Price. I can see that. So can everyone. Mrs. Pike smiled nervously. I heard there was some trouble. Who told you? No one. Price waited. Mrs. Pike sighed. Mrs. Harcourt. What did she tell you? That the invitations were connected to your father. Mrs. Bell looked at her. What else? She said the orchard meeting was not the important meeting. Price leaned forward. What was? Mrs. Pike looked at the tin. The meeting here. Mrs. Bell felt suddenly cold. What meeting? The Sunday one. What Sunday? The Sunday after Thomas died. Mr. Vale closed his eyes. Mrs. Bell looked at him. You knew? Yes. You knew about this? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because your father asked me not to. You promised him to. No. Mr. Vale looked at her. I was afraid of him. Mrs. Bell stared. My father? He could be very persuasive. Price looked amused. An admirable village quality. Nobody smiled. Mrs. Pike sat down. There were 5 people here that Sunday. Who? Your father, Mr. Vale, Mrs. Harcourt, Thomas's brother Daniel, and me. Mrs. Bell looked at the doorway. Daniel Cross. Yes. What happened? We argued. About what? The key. Price's attention sharpened. Mrs. Pike continued. Daniel wanted it. Your father refused. Why? Because Daniel believed the key proved his brother had been murdered. Mrs. Bell whispered, and was he? Mrs. Pike looked down. No one could prove it. Price corrected her gently. No one wanted to prove it. Mrs. Pike looked at him. That is not the same thing. No. Mrs. Pike remembered something else. The pie, she said. I nearly left it at home. No. But when I went back for it, I found the kitchen door open. Price looked up. Had you locked it? Yes. Did anything seem missing? Mrs. Pike shook her head. Nothing. Then why mention it? Because on the table was another envelope. Mrs. Pike reached into her handbag. I brought it with me. She placed it beside the tin. Price did not touch it. Why didn't you open it? I thought I had learned something from your example. An excellent beginning, Price said. Mrs. Bell opened the tin. Inside was a brass key, wrapped in a piece of blue cloth. There was also a small folded note. She unfolded it. The handwriting was her father's. She read aloud. If Eleanor remembers, tell her the door was never meant to keep anyone out. Mr. Vale sat down heavily. Price took the note. What door? Mrs. Bell asked. Nobody answered. Then Mrs. Pike spoke. Number 14. Mrs. Bell looked towards the hallway. But that is my front door. Price shook his head. No. He looked at the old floorboards beneath them. That is what we have all been assuming. A slow silence followed. Then, beneath the floor, something clicked. Mrs. Bell stood. Price did not move. Mr. Vale whispered, It has opened. Price looked at him. What has? The door your father told us never to mention. Outside, the church clock began striking 4. 1, 2, 3. Then it stopped. The village fell silent, and for the first time, Mrs. Bell understood why the anonymous invitation had contained no sender's name. The sender had never needed one. Everyone in the room already knew whom they were afraid of. The sound beneath the floor came again. It was not loud. That made it worse. Mrs. Bell stood beside the table, holding the brass key. Mrs. Pike had stopped breathing properly. Mr. Vale looked as though he had just been reminded of an appointment he had spent 28 years avoiding. Price remained perfectly still. Where? He asked. Mr. Vale pointed towards the kitchen. Under the old pantry. Mrs. Bell frowned. There is no pantry. There was. When? When? In 1998, Price walked into the kitchen. The cupboards were modern, but the floorboards near the back wall were older than the rest. One board had shifted slightly. Mrs. Bell followed. Shouldn't we call someone? Who? The police? Price looked at her. I am the police. Oh. He knelt and pressed the board. It moved. Beneath it was a narrow iron ring. Mrs. Bell stared. That wasn't there yesterday. It was, said Price. You simply hadn't noticed it. He lifted the board. A shallow compartment appeared beneath it. Inside was a second envelope. Cream paper. No name, no stamp. Mrs. Bell whispered, "Another invitation." Price shook his head. "No." He lifted it carefully. "This one has been waiting." Mr. Vale came into the kitchen. "Don't open it." Price looked at him. "Why?" "Because your father wrote it." Mrs. Bell turned. "My father?" Vale nodded. "He wrote it before the meeting." Price handed the envelope to Mrs. Bell. She examined the handwriting. It was unmistakably her father's. "What does it say?" "I don't know." "You've never seen it?" "No." "Then how do you know it is his?" Vale looked at her. "Because I watched him write it." The answer silenced them. "When?" "The afternoon Thomas died." Mrs. Bell's fingers tightened around the envelope. Why would my father write an invitation after Thomas had died? He wasn't inviting anyone. Then what was it? A chair. Mrs. Bell stared at him. Price said nothing. Vale continued. "There were 6 chairs at the meeting." Mrs. Pike corrected him. 5, 6. There were 5 people. 1 chair was empty. Price looked towards the sitting room. "Whose?" Vale swallowed. That was the point. Mrs. Bell began to understand. "You were expecting someone?" "Yes." "Who?" "No one knew." "That makes no sense." "It did then." Price leaned against the kitchen doorway. "An empty chair can be very useful." Mrs. Pike looked at him. "How?" "It allows everyone to imagine the person they fear is sitting there." Nobody answered. Price continued. "Your father left the chair empty deliberately." Mrs. Bell looked at Vale. "Why?" "To remind us that someone had not arrived." "Who?" Vale shook his head. "We never learned." Price studied him. "But your father believed he would." "Yes." "Did he leave an invitation?" "Yes." "To whom?" "That was never known." Mrs. Bell looked down at the envelope. "Then why was it hidden here?" Vale's expression changed. "Because your father discovered something." "What?" "He realized the invitation had been delivered to the wrong person." Mrs. Bell looked up. "To whom?" Vale hesitated. Then he said, "Your mother." The room became completely silent. "My mother was dead. She was alive in 1998. I know. She received the invitation." Mrs. Bell shook her head. "She never told me." "She didn't tell anyone." Price asked, "Where was she supposed to go?" Vale answered quietly, "Number 14." Mrs. Bell looked towards the hallway. "My mother was invited here?" "Yes." "Why?" "To bring the key." Mrs. Bell looked at the brass key in her hand. Price noticed the change in her expression. "You have remembered something." She nodded slowly. "My mother gave me a key." "When?" "The morning after Thomas died." "Did she say what it opened?" "No." "Did you ask?" "I was 13. Price smiled faintly. "Quite." Mrs. Bell closed her eyes. "She told me to keep it safe." "Where did she get it?" "I don't know." "Did she seem frightened?" "Yes." "Of whom?" Mrs. Bell opened her eyes. "My father." Mr. Vale looked away. Price asked, "And what did your mother say?" Mrs. Bell hesitated. She said, "Your father thinks the empty chair belongs to someone who has gone." Price's expression sharpened. "What did she mean?" "I don't know." "Try." Mrs. Bell looked at the key. "She said the person had never gone anywhere." Mr. Vale sat down. Mrs. Pike whispered, "That can't be." Price looked at her. "Why not?" "Because Thomas was the person they were waiting for." "No," said Price. Everyone turned. Thomas had already arrived. Mr. Vale stared. Price continued. That is why the story never made sense. Everyone remembered Thomas as the dead man, but the empty chair existed before his death. Mrs. Bell looked at the old photograph. The meeting was on the 17th. Yes. Thomas died on the 19th. Yes. Then the empty chair could not have been for him. Exactly. Price took the photograph. Your father wasn't waiting for Thomas. He turned it over. He was waiting for someone else. Mrs. Pike looked frightened. Who? Price studied the faces in the photograph. Someone who knew about the key. Mrs. Bell whispered. My mother. No. Price looked at her. Your mother was the messenger. Then who was the guest? Price pointed to the empty space beside her father. That is why the chair was empty. A knock sounded at the front door. Nobody moved. Then came another. Mrs. Bell looked at Price. Are you expecting someone? No. The third knock was softer. Price walked into the hallway. The door opened before he reached it. No one stood outside. Only another cream envelope lay on the step. This time, however, there was a name written on it. Mrs. Bell leaned closer. The name was not hers. It was Mrs. Pike's. Mrs. Pike stepped backwards. I don't understand. Price picked up the envelope. Neither does the person who sent it. He looked at the handwriting. Or perhaps they understand perfectly. Mrs. Bell looked towards the empty hallway. What now? Price turned the envelope over. There is only one way to find out. He gave it to Mrs. Pike. Open it. She did. Her face changed. What does it say? Mrs. Pike lowered the paper. That is impossible. Why? Price asked. Because I was not invited. That is precisely what makes it interesting. I remember, I was in the village shop until 5. Mrs. Bell looked at her. You told us you were here. I said I knew about the meeting. That is not the same. No. I came afterwards. After everyone had left. Yes. And the chair? It remained. Empty. No. She looked at Price. Someone had left a coat across it. Whose coat? I never knew. Mrs. Pike looked at Price. It says, I was the one who sat in the empty chair. Price's eyes narrowed. Now, he said quietly, we have finally reached the part of the story someone has been trying to change. Mrs. Pike read the sentence again. Her hands had stopped trembling. Price stood opposite her. What exactly does it say? She passed him the card. You sat in the empty chair. You know why? Mrs. Bell looked at her. Did you? No. Then why would someone write that? Mrs. Pike swallowed. Because I was there. You said you came afterwards. I did. Then you couldn't have sat in it. Mrs. Pike looked miserable. I didn't mean the meeting. Price raised his eyes. What do you mean? The chair was still there when I arrived. I sat down because my feet hurt. Mrs. Bell stared. You sat in the chair? Yes. When? After everyone had gone. Price read the card once more. And you told no one? No. Why? Because I thought it was foolish. Price smiled faintly. In Ashcombe, that is not usually sufficient reason. Mrs. Pike looked towards the window. I had been asked to deliver something. What? A key. Mrs. Bell looked at the brass key in her hand. Where did you get it? From your mother. The answer was so quiet that Mrs. Bell almost missed it. My mother gave you the key? Yes. When? On the morning after Thomas died. Mrs. Bell sat down. What did she say? She told me to take it to your father. Did you? No. Why not? Because your mother changed her mind. Why? She said your father had lied. Price remained silent for the first time that afternoon in silence. Mrs. Pike continued. She told me the key did not open number 6. It opened something underneath number 14. Mrs. Bell looked towards the floor. The hidden room. Yes. Did you know about it? No. Then why didn't you tell anyone? Mrs. Pike gave a tired smile. Because I was 28 years younger and considerably more foolish. Price looked at Mr. Vale. And you? I knew. You knew about the room. Yes. Did Thomas know? Yes. Did Mrs. Bell's mother know? Yes. Did Mrs. Bell's father know? Vale nodded. Then what was the secret? Vale looked at the photograph. The house was used for private meetings. That is hardly criminal. No. Then why the secrecy? Because one of the meetings concerned money. Mrs. Bell looked at him. What money? Village funds. Price's expression remained unchanged. Whose funds? The Church Restoration Fund, Mrs. Pike interrupted. That isn't the whole story. Vale looked at her. No, she continued. Some of the money disappeared. How much? Enough to cause embarrassment. Who handled it? Mrs. Pike looked at Mr. Vale. Thomas. Mrs. Bell stared. Thomas stole it. No, said Price. No, said Price. Everyone turned towards him. He placed the card on the table. Thomas discovered it was missing. Vale nodded. He suspected someone. Who? Your father. Mrs. Bell looked stunned. My father? He had access to the accounts. But why would he steal from the church? He didn't. Then why was Thomas suspicious? Because the money had been transferred through number 14. Price looked at Mrs. Bell. Your father discovered the transfer and tried to conceal it. Why? Because the person responsible was someone he believed he could protect. Mrs. Bell looked at Vale. Who? Vale said nothing. Price waited. Eventually he spoke. Mrs. Bell's mother. Mrs. Bell stared at him. My mother? She had borrowed money. For what? To pay a debt. What debt? Vale looked down. Your father's. Price answered. Your mother had discovered that your father was using church funds to cover losses from a failed business venture. Mrs. Bell closed her eyes. So Thomas found out? Yes. And my father tried to stop him? Yes. Did he kill him? No. The answer was immediate. How do you know? Because the accident was exactly what it appeared to be. Mrs. Bell stared at him. You're saying Thomas died by accident? Yes. Then why did everyone behave as though he had been murdered? Price looked at the photograph. Because guilt is not the same thing as murder. Mr. Vale nodded slowly. Your father believed his actions had caused Thomas to confront the truth. And Thomas died. Yes. So my father blamed himself. He did. And the invitations. Price leaned back. Those began because someone found the old records. Who? Price looked at Mrs. Pike. She shook her head. I don't know. You do. She looked frightened. I saw someone in the orchard last month. Who? Daniel Cross. Mrs. Bell stared. Thomas's brother? Yes. Why would he send the invitations? He believed his brother had been silenced. Price nodded. He wanted everyone who had kept quiet to speak. But why hide the sender's name? Because if he signed them, nobody would come. Mrs. Bell looked at the first card. The orchard? Yes. The list of names? Yes. The empty chair? Price smiled faintly. Not a threat, a question. What question? Who remembered? Mrs. Pike sat down. And the invitation to number 6. To force Mr. Vale to speak. And the one to me? To make you remember. Mrs. Bell looked at him. Then why did someone enter my house? Price considered this. Daniel wanted the ledger. But he didn't take it. No. Why? Because someone else had already removed the important page. Mrs. Bell looked at the old ledger. The page dated August 1998. Yes. Who removed it? Price turned towards Mr. Vale. He looked embarrassed. I did. Mrs. Bell stared. Why? Because your father asked me to. What did it contain? Your mother's signature. Mrs. Bell's expression changed. She signed the transfer. Yes. Then she was involved. Yes. And my father protected her. Yes. And you helped him. Mrs. Bell looked at him. All these years, everyone let me believe my father was difficult. Price looked at her gently. He was. She laughed briefly. Then she looked at the brass key. And the invitation? Price picked it up. The invitation was never really asking you to attend somewhere. Then what was it asking? To open a door. Which door? The one your father spent 28 years keeping closed. She looked towards the kitchen. What is behind it? Price went to the hidden compartment. He fitted the brass key into the old lock beneath the floor. It turned. A section of flooring lifted. Below was a narrow stone staircase. Silence followed. Price climbed the stairs. At the bottom was a small room containing a table, 6 chairs, and a wooden box. One chair stood apart from the others. It was empty. On the table lay a final envelope. This one had a name, Eleanor Bell. She took it. Inside was a single sheet. Her father's handwriting filled the page. He had written a few lines. If you are reading this, Eleanor, then the invitation has finally reached the right person. I did not hide the truth because I wanted it forgotten. I hid it because I wanted you to have a life that did not belong to our mistakes. Mrs. Bell lowered the paper. Price looked away. After a moment, she continued. At the bottom was one sentence. The empty chair was always yours. Mrs. Bell looked at the 6 chairs. She understood. Her father had left one place for her, not as a guest, but as the person who would decide whether the family's silence should continue. Price climbed the stairs. Well, she folded the letter. I think, she said, the village has talked enough. Price smiled. That would be remarkable. She looked at him. What happens now? Nothing dramatic. After all this. Especially after all this. Outside, the church clock began striking 7. Every stroke was clear. Mrs. Bell looked towards the orchard beyond the window. The clock was slow. Price nodded. 10 minutes. Why? To make everyone late. Mrs. Bell smiled. So nobody would have to sit in the empty chair. Price put on his hat. Perhaps. They left the room together. Behind them, the hidden door remained open. For the first time in 28 years, nobody had been asked to close it. And in Ashcombe, that was considered progress.